Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Andre Bright, your burnout coach, and this webinar is Mastering Stress in the Corporate World, Unlocking Productivity and Well-Being. A lot has been happening in the last 4 years or so that's been changing the landscape, and especially in terms of how we deal with stress individually as well as companies. And you would have seen the impact happening within your companies. But the question is what to do about it. You might have tried certain things already. Some of them might be working, some of them aren't. This webinar is designed to uncover some of the elements which might be missed. Some of the things that you might not be thinking about, some of the things that might be a little bit of a surprise, and some of the things that are actionable tools, actionable tips and strategies that I found to be really useful when it comes to managing stress within the workplace. So the first question on your mind then is, who am I? So my name is Andre Bright. I am your executive coach, and I am qualified with ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and Academy of Executive Coaches. And I work with individuals and companies, specifically around stress and burnout. So I'm a burnout recovery coach by trade. I help people understand stress, their triggers, and what to do about it, and where they come from. Just a little story about myself in terms of my own experience with burnout, and ironically, it's very closely related to what we're talking about today. Is I was in a company which was fastly growing, really, really ambitious company, huge company already, but it was multiplying at an exponential rate, which was great for them. But what I found is within about 6 to 8 months, my role there became really, really pressurized. The expectations were growing fastly beyond my ability to meet them. And at first, I thought it was me. And then I remember having a conversation with a fellow friend of mine who was also an architect working for another company. And I asked them what kind of sizes of projects they've been handling. And they told me. And then I told them mine. And they said, someone of my point in my career should not be handling projects of that scale. And that's when I realized that there was something going wrong. I came to them there as my line manager and HR, and I said, I'm really struggling here. I need some support. I need some help. The three projects I had were really big, and a lot of expectation was riding on them. And I felt like I was struggling to meet the demands, which was letting me down as well as them. They said they understood, but then within a couple of months, they gave me another two projects. So now I'm handling five projects instead of the three that I was already struggling with. And that just drove me towards a crazy space of burnout. There were mornings where I'd wake up actually physiologically scared, like I was already in danger. And I think that was the first time I really experienced anxiety to that level. I'm usually quite good at managing stress. I'm usually quite chill. I'm usually quite resilient when it comes to that. But that period of time is probably the one of the worst times I've had when it comes to stress. I was physically shaking when waking up. And then it meant that throughout the day, things just added to that. And one of the things about stress is if you're working in a stressful environment, which takes up 40 to 50 hours of your week, you sometimes think to yourself, okay, I'll recover at home. But then at home, you have your own responsibilities. You have home life, you have partners, you have friends, you have things you have to do, which aren't really about rest, right? So then you don't actually ever get to zero to be able to reset. So what ends up happening is that stress built up and built up and built up over time until the point where it became a manifestation in terms of my lack of sleep. It manifested in my health. I was losing weight rapidly. Things like that started happening. And it was at the time I didn't realize what this was. This was long before I became a stress coach, a burnout recovery coach. So I didn't really understand what was going on. I had to go to my GP to find that out. But all of this was happening. And then finally, they said to me in a performance review that I was underperforming. And I thought that was quite interesting. So in that meeting, though, they had brought in HR. So I was already really on edge at that. And one of the things that we had a very frank conversation, which was necessary. And what they admitted in the end was that they, as a growing company, did not do their due diligence in terms of being clear as to who they needed to fill that role. They needed someone who was senior, and I just come straight out of uni. I just graduated, and they needed someone who had at least 5, 10 years of experience so they could hit the ground running without needing any kind of support where I needed a lot of it. And so there was issues on their side as well as mine, and that became my very last day. And just to give you an idea about how stresses and stressors work, stresses are what happens within the body. Stressors are what happens outside of the body to influence the body, right? And we're going to go through a diagram later on to look at how this translates to companies. Once I was effectively fired from that role, I remember being downstairs walking towards the bus stop. My first thoughts were, what is my mom going to say? This is a bad reflection of me as a human. I'm not the kind of person who gets fired from a job. I didn't perform to my best ability, never mind their expectation. I was just really pouring on things in my mind. But then as the steps went, this stress just lifted from me. And I felt light. I was practically skipping by the time I got to the bus home because I realized this thing that had been causing all this stress now had gone. Right. And then I found another job and the experience was completely different. So sometimes it's about the person and how they manage stress, but sometimes it's about the environment and how the environment influences their stress load, should we say. So today we're going to be looking at six main things. Number one is looking at the corporate burnout crisis. You would have seen this since the pandemic, for example. Things have changed. The landscape has been changing on a daily basis. How people approach employment and what they expect from it is completely different to what it was 10 years ago. Number two is the true cost of burnout. So this is looking at the impact on the companies themselves, which you might be experiencing. Number three is why traditional solutions aren't enough. So we're going to be digging a little bit below the surface to find out what that is. Then the relief framework that I developed by necessity, actually. Initially, I developed it as an individual. It's what I use to manage stress, but then I adapted it to companies so that it shows how companies can use the relief framework to help their employees and create a better environment. And then I have an offer for you, in terms of a workshop. So I can introduce the idea to your company. You can see how it feels, see what the results are. And then there's an offer afterwards, which will allow you to do packages with me as well. And then the next steps is how we'll end to look at what the next steps are with me. So the corporate burnout crisis, this is going to set the stage. Some of these figures you're going to be aware of, and some of these you might not be, but it's just going to set the stage so you understand how much of an issue this is. And it's not just your company, it's not just the company, your competitors, it's a global thing at this point. So 79% of UK employees commonly experience work-related stress, with 27% describing their level of stress as high or unmanageable, which is going to be connected to one of the stats that's going to be coming in the next slide as well. Unmanageable is a really important word there. 1 in 6 workers in the UK experience stress, anxiety, and depression, which are often exacerbated by burnout. So burnout is the result of prolonged, unmanaged stress. So what happens when the environment is stressful, when they don't have the tools to be able to deal with stress within their body, and none of that is dealt with over time, is they reach this point of burnout, physical, mental, and emotional burnout, where they just short circuit and they either completely be disengaged. The three examples are reduced sense of personal achievement, which they think nothing they do is worthwhile and meaningless. They lose motivation. Emotional exhaustion, which means that they don't feel anything anymore, or they feel everything really sensitively and they short circuit on a daily basis, or things like that. So those are the things that we're dealing with when we're talking about burnout. 50% of all work-related ill health court cases in 2020 and 2021. So this is burnout, the pandemic times, which included stress, depression, anxiety, resulted in 17.9 million working days lost. And how that looks is in terms of sick days, sick leave, people taking unpaid absences, people leaving their jobs without a plan B, which is one of the phenomenon we saw from the pandemic, is people were leaving companies without having another company lined up, and they felt that having no job was worse than having the job that they were unfulfilled in, which is significant. Chronic stress can lead to physical health issues like cardiovascular disease, with long-term burnout contributing to higher rates of heart attacks and strokes among the affected. And these are just the surface level things. There's a lot of things that happen, especially as chronic illnesses can go. One of the first things that you're asked when you go to the GP is, are you under stress? And if you as an employer are creating an environment which causes a lot of stress, you might find that there are a lot of employees who are really struggling as a result, and you might not even be aware. So today is going to be uncovering a little bit of that. The next level is what the impact of burnout is on teams. So 63% are people are more likely to take a sick day if burnt out, and 2.6 times as likely to be actively seeking a different job, which leaves gaps in your teams, which leaves gaps in your system, right? And so if you can't rely on your partner to be there, then it means that it's going to impact your productivity of the people who are shouldering the weight, which also adds stress to the people who are left behind. 40% of employees believe burnout impacts their relationships with colleagues, leading to less collaboration and more conflicts. Can I rely on them? Like I said before, can we collaborate? Are they functional right now? Can I trust that they will do what they said they will do? If there's a deadline coming, will they pull their weight, quote unquote, or are they under so much stress that they can't function right now? 8% of UK employees feel highly engaged at work, which means that 92% don't. And with burnout cited as a primary cause of disengagement, then this is a really significant number. So now to the true cost of burnout. So we talked about what it was like for the individual and teams. This is really looking at the companies, right? So these are the numbers you might be familiar with. 45 billion pounds worth of the annual cost of poor mental health to UK employers in terms of, and that's quantified by lost productivity due to burnout being a significant contributor, right? One of the things that I found interesting in terms of these numbers is that online and in conversations, we often hear this phrase where, they say, oh, if you die today, then your employer will replace you tomorrow. And we know that that's not the case. It's actually quite difficult to replace good talent. And so when you lose good talent, it can actually be a knock to the company. So it's really important for us to make sure that they are felt as rewarded, as appreciated while they're there, so they don't leave that gap, right? So 30.6 thousand pounds is the average cost of replacing an employee. And this was in 2014, which might have changed by now, but it's basically the average cost, the annual cost salary of the person is what it will take to replace them. That includes recruiting new people, the onboarding process, the training, and the loss of productivity that is a result of that as well. And just to remember that 25% of employees are more likely to leave their job due to stress and burnout, leading to high turnover rates and increase hiring costs. So if you imagine how much does it cost for you to lose or replace an employee, might be the average salary of that person. And if 25% of your employees are leaving the job, then it means that 25% times that annual salary may have a huge impact on your bottom line. So this is how big of an issue it might be for your company, and hopefully not, but in terms of the actual statistics, these are what we're seeing. So companies with high levels of burnout and poor mental health support risk damaging to their reputation as well. And this is one I put completely separately, because reputation is one of those silent killers. What is your reputation? Is it such that people want to work with you, or have they heard something bad about you and so they don't want to work with you at all? If I, for example, am to share my story of that workplace, which was growing too fast to my peers, then none of them are going to want to work in that environment. So then you never really know the impact of your reputation, of your brand, your employee brand, right? Your brand to the employees, until you start to see these numbers decline or increase if you're doing really well. And they affect the ability to attract top client. If there is a top client who has a choice of where they can go, would they choose you based on what they've heard, what they've seen, what they've experienced maybe before, right? Would they choose to stay? These are all things to consider when it comes to how to create an environment which will actually retain some of this top talent. So then why traditional solutions aren't enough? So one of the things that to point out at this point is I'm not under any false assumption that you have done nothing to solve this problem. You probably put everything in the kitchen sink into it. And these next slides are to start looking at why those traditional solutions aren't enough. you might be looking at flexible working hours. You might be looking at bringing food in on a Friday or drinks and things like that. You might be, bring a sofa or something into the office for people to take naps in or something like that. You might be doing certain things, but they might not be working if they're not dealing with the cause of the problems. So here we go. So there's 6 things that I've noted that are some of the reasons why those traditional methods don't work. Number one is they don't necessarily consider the external influences on the business. So, for example, you might be looking at thinking to yourself, what are the market trends? What are the pressures that the company is under? What are the profit margins? What do we need to do to stay afloat? And this might have an impact on how you're translating stress towards your employees, right? And so if you don't manage that, then no matter what happens in terms of strategies internally, if you're not aware that your external factors are having an impact as well, then you may not be able to create sustainable solutions. You might not be considering the internal stresses from your employees. What are they going through? How did they deal with the pandemic? Was it a good thing or a bad thing? Have they had a recent, birth or death, for example? Have they moved house, or are they coming back off maternity leave? What are the things that are happening that are changes in their life, as well as their internal capacity for stress? Individually, it's not the same across the board. You might have some people who are more resilient than others. So what are the internal stresses from your employees, and how are they having an impact on the environment that you're creating in your workplace? You might not be involving employees at all in the decision-making process. You might just be thinking to yourself, okay, this company is doing that, or I saw this online, or there was a report which suggested that I do this, and so I'm going to do it. And you may not have included your employees in this. And it's really important to get employee buy-in when doing any kind of strategy, because otherwise it might exacerbate the idea that you're not listening to them, right? So have you been involving them in your processes, in your ideas, in your brainstorming, in your implementation, in your tests and trials of some of these ideas? And have you been looking for feedback? Have you given them space to say this is working or this isn't, or to improve on what you might have had as an idea before? Another thing is that your solutions might be reactive, not proactive. You might wait till the problems are happening before you start to implement things, instead of having a look ahead and what the next few quarters are looking like. What are the impacts on the company going to be? What are the trends? What are the things you've seen internally? What are the things that are happening that seem to be having good results elsewhere that we might be able to implement just for 3 months and see if it works and get feedback, etc., and decide if we want to keep it. You might not have that passion, that initiative to try these things consistently till the point where you find, to create a culture where they too, your employees too, will be looking for ways to increase the productivity and everything within the company. You might be looking at the symptoms and not the causes. And the next slide is going to be really important for this, because it's going to go into 4 quadrants, and I'll break that down in a minute. But you might find from looking at that diagram that you might be working on all the wrong things, right? And so that one is a really important one to pay attention to. Or you might be looking at tactics and not strategy. So you might be looking at short term instead of long term. What are the quick fixes or the low hanging fruit that we can do, instead of, okay, maybe we need to invest a little bit more time, a little bit more money, a little bit more effort into this idea, but we will have a larger impact in the long term, because we plan to be here for another 10, 20, 100, 200 years, right? So this diagram here is probably the most important that you're going to be seeing soon, right? And I developed this initially from an individual perspective. So all of this was about the individual, looking at stresses being the stresses that are coming from the body. So your sensations, your heart rate, your your mouth watering, and all these kind of things that happen within the body, your endorphins, your hormones running around, your cortisol levels, etc. And then your external stressors. So that's your environment, something that's happening across the world that you just found out about, all these things that are affecting you, right? But then now I've developed it to adapt to industry, to businesses like yours. So there's 4 quadrants and they're split by these 2 axes. The y-axis looks at the symptoms at the top half of this of the screen, which is your visible indicators of stress. And then on the lower half of the screen is the causes, which are the underlying issues, which is where a lot of people aren't really focusing on, which means that they keep finding themselves in this cycle of stress as a company. We throw all these stuff, but people are still leaving. They're still complaining about stress, and I don't know what's going on. It might be because you're not looking at the internal and external causes that are causing the stress, and instead you're focusing on the symptoms, which you think are the problem, but they're really not. Right, so let's have a look at some of these examples. So if you were to look at the external causes, there might be globalization pressures, unstable industry conditions. There might be a recession going on. All these things that might be happening, which will have an effect on your market competition where you are, your economic downturn, your regulatory changes, your supply chain, all these kind of things that might be happening. And that will have an impact on your leadership who are making the decisions for the company, and their stress will be translated to the people that are working under them, the teams, etc. Right? So you might be seeing high employee turnover, increased absenteeism, low productivity. But then the question is, where is this coming from? That is not the actual problem. The problem is the problem below the problem. And that might be looking at poor leadership. It might be lack of career development opportunities, unclear job roles like I experienced, toxic work culture. And all of these 4 are going to be related to each other. You might find that there might be a period of time, there might be a specific quarter or a specific year where everything seemed to go wrong. Well, I would encourage you to break things down into these 4 quadrants to see where all the factors are coming in from. The reason why we struggle to get out of or we struggle to create a healthy, non-toxic environment is that we're not looking at holistically what is going on. We might just be looking at 1 or 2 of these instead of all 4, right? So even as an idea, if there's nothing else you take away from today, take away the idea that there are symptoms and causes, internal stresses from within the organization, and external stressors, which are influences on the organization. Okay, those 4 concepts will be enough for you to dig a little bit deeper to see what the real problem is. And by doing that, you'll be able to find a more sustainable solution to your issue of retention, to burnout, and employee engagement. Okay, so now looking at that, I've come to the point where we got the framework, and I use the iceberg analogy to show the idea about what's above and below the waterline. Then I kind of developed this into a relief framework. And like I said, this started as an individual, but then I developed it as a business module, right? So the relief framework is built up as 6 elements. Number 1 is resilient mindset, which is looking at cultivating mental toughness and a growth mindset. Number 2 is efficient stress management, which is looking at practical tools to handle daily pressures. Number 3 is lifestyle optimization, which is looking at integrating work-life balance into corporate culture. Number 4 is inner alignment, which is really important, which is ensuring employees' values align with their work and the company values. Number 5, which is emotional mastery, which is techniques for managing emotions in high pressure situations. Number 6 is turning focused action, turning insights into actionable strategies for sustainable success. So when you're looking at this, the question you might be having in your mind is, okay, Andre, but what does this look like to a company? Well, I'm glad you asked. So here are the ways I tend to, and these are not exhaustive, but these are some of the main ways that I, for example, have used to help before, and I would like to help you, right? And what we would do if we were to work together, for example, is we would look at each of these 6 areas and say, what are the things that we can implement within the company, which will have the biggest impact with the smallest input, right? Try and find that balance. We'll usually come up with a short, medium, and long-term implementation method, which will be looking at, okay, maybe in the first quarter, what we're going to do now, then in the next year, and then in the next few years, what can we do to get ourselves up to the stage where we track our changes and track our employee engagement and turnover, so that we can see what exactly is going on. We can plug the holes. We can see growth continue at a sustainable rate in a way that doesn't burn out our employees and find us back where we started. Okay, so just breaking down this, and this section is going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to give you an idea of what some of these are. Number one is looking at resilient mindset. So this is resilience training programs will develop workshops where I would develop workshops that teach employees how to build a resilient mindset, right? And we focus on adaptability, perseverance, and a growth mindset. The idea that whatever's happening right now, it can change, I can learn. Then you got mentorship initiatives. A lot of people have mentorships, but you got normal mentorships or reverse mentorships, where you pair employees with mentors who can help them navigate challenges and setbacks, reinforcing the importance of resilience in the workplace. Then you've got resilience boosting challenges. So this one is a little bit more fun, but it's really important because it pushes people, right? So implement monthly challenges that encourage employees to step out of their comfort zones, promoting resilience through exposure to new and difficult tasks. Some of the problem with people's low resilience is that they're not put under pressure that they can manage in a managed environment. So this creates an environment where you're pushing people gently to go out of their comfort zones, as opposed to dumping them into a situation where they're going to burn out immediately. So number two is efficient stress management. So this is looking at really things like stress audits, regular assessments for the workplace stress levels through surveys or stress audits, right? You identify key stressors and implement targeted interventions, at specific times of the year, for example, with specific people or specific teams, right? Undermine coaching. I'm also, like I said, I'm an executive coach. So I will provide access to stress management coaching sessions where employees can learn practical techniques for managing stress, such as mindfulness, time management, and relaxation exercises. This can be one-to-one, it can be group or team, it can be just with the leadership, right? So the final one here is workload management system. So we'll implement tools and processes that help employees manage their workloads more efficiently, reducing the unnecessary stress caused by poor task management. One of the things that I found myself doing when not managed properly or finding the right support is I'll put all my work into the things that actually don't matter, but it's not communicated to me that these roles are the ones I should be working on. These are the ones that really push the needle. Do your employees know how the business works, so they know that where they fit into it? So when they get certain tasks and stuff coming down, they know which ones to focus on. Obviously, that's the management's job to do for them, but having the general knowledge of how the company works means that for whatever reason, if the manager can't step in, that they have the know-how to be able to say, okay, this is what I really need to focus on right now, and this is what's going to move the needle. And really, as a company, that's what you want, where you want to be getting to. Lifestyle optimization is really where we start thinking about long term. This is looking at the company as a whole and how it works. So this is looking at wellness programs and offering wellness programs that include fitness classes, dance, maybe even arts. And one of the things I offer is lunchtime classes with the arts. So I'm a creative, so I'm a professional dancer before I became an architect. So I would do movement training and classes. Some people don't like the gym. Some people don't like going for walks. Some people would prefer to dance, right? So how can you do it in such a way that you find a way for people to release some of the stresses of the day and come back re-energized for the second half of the afternoon? Might include nutrition workshops and access to mental health resources, promoting a holistic approach to employee health. That's really the key word here, holistic. Part of what we're seeing a lot of the time is that, okay, cool, let's just make it so it's we're going to take Mondays and Fridays you can work from home, but then there's no support on a holistic level. Who are they as a people? What support do they need, right? Flexible working arrangements is what I was mentioning just now, but ones that encourage work-life balance by providing options for flexible working hours, remote work, or compressed work weeks, reducing lifestyle related stress. Everyone is going to have different needs. Some people are going to be working in such a way that it's great that they have this 9 to 5 structure. Some people, it doesn't work for that. Some people might have children. Some people might have external responsibilities that work better if they have certain times. They're able to have at least the flexibility to be able to manage that. And one of the things that I've seen is that companies are really resistive to that, because as a company, there might be systems in place that make it easier if everyone's doing the same thing. But what you might find is, with a little bit of a change, you'll find that the employees, seeing that you're making that effort to give them the room to be able to adapt to whatever they have going on at home outside of the work, is they will give you more. They will be able to they'll be able to say, okay, cool, they've actually allowed me to do this, which means that it actually gives me the capacity to do the thing they needed to do in the first place. Right. So, and the last one is health challenges. Introducing company-wide health challenges, um, such as step competitions, cycle to work schemes, and healthy eating initiatives to promote a culture of wellness and prevent burnout. Inner alignment for me is my number one, me as a personal thing. This is really important to me. Do the values of the individual align with the values of the company, right? And this is one of those things where we can probably do more during the onboarding process in terms of the interviews to find out what these are, psychometric tests and things like that. What matters to them? What will they fight for? What do they fight against? And do those things matter, especially now when there's all kinds of things going on in the world? Are people leaving you because you have a client relationship or a supplier relationship with someone who supports something that they don't? And they're going to be, at this particular day and age, people are going to be leaving as a result of that. Like, what can we do to see that the values of the individual align with the values of the company, right? So this can look like purpose-driven workshops that I can do, which are workshops that help employees connect their personal values with the goals of the company's mission, and fostering a sense of purpose and reducing existential stress, right? There's also career development planning. So supporting the employees in aligning their career paths with their personal aspirations, offering guidance on setting and achieving meaningful professional goals. But I would actually encourage personal goals as well. How can you, as an employer, be involved in helping them with their personal goals? If you know that they want to, get to expand or grow in terms of their family number. They want to have they're trying for a child, or they want to move house to something bigger, and they're going to need more financial capacity. How can you put them onto a path which can lead them to the kind of pay scale that they're looking for, which will help you, which means that they're going to have a promotion at some point, which means you can bring in new people into the fold, right? How can their personal life connect with their professional life, and you being the key part that bridges the two of them together, right? Mindfulness sessions, offering regular mindfulness or meditation sessions to help employees align their inner state with their external work environment, promoting clarity and focus. And this one is actually connected to a few of the other ones that we'll go to in a moment, about emotional mastery, for example. What can they do with their physical bodies to manage their stress levels? How can they reduce their cortisol within the body, their adrenaline, so that they can get to a stage of calm and handle whatever stress is happening. External stressors are affecting them without them actually losing it, right? One of the things that can happen is like chair yoga. How can they, within or stretches? This is one, me personally, I do a lot. How can I, in my particular seat, do something that might take as much as 10-15 seconds, breathing exercises, things like that, which can help me get back to a regulated state so that I can deal with whatever's happening. Sometimes it might look like a walk, going to the toilet. People who smoke go out every hour, right? And I always find it interesting that if I don't smoke, then I don't get the chance to go out for that hourly stroll, for example. And I always find that interesting. So what can you do as a company to encourage that? Emotional mastery looks like intelligence training, emotional EQ training, right? To help employees better understand and manage their emotions, improving interpersonal relationships, and reducing workplace conflicts. And this is a huge thing. Most people are scared of conflict. And so if something is wrong, instead of speaking to the person, they will hold it in. And what ends up happening is that grows resentment towards that person, but it also grows resentment towards themselves. They're not standing up for themselves if they're spoken to a certain way, or they haven't spoken out when they've got too much on their plate, but they've just accepted more on their plate because they're the person people always come to because they know that they'd pull through. And you may not realize, you may look at this and say, oh, this person is just really good, I can always rely on them, so I'm going to give them everything. But then that could be leading them towards burnout because they're not in a position where they feel like they're able to deal with conflict, because they feel like if they speak up, they might lose their job, or they might, cause all kinds of problems which they may not want. So conflict resolution workshops are really important. They focus on conflict resolution techniques, enabling employees to handle disputes constructively without escalating the stress. And then empathy building exercises, which is really important as well. Um, Team building activities that enhance empathy among employees, creating a more supportive and emotionally intelligent workplace culture. Do they rely on each other? Can they lean on each other? Do they know that the other person has their back, right? And do they care, which is really important, right? Do they feel seen or heard within the team? And then finally, it's looking at focused action, which is goal setting workshops, which is conducting workshops that teach employees how to set and achieve SMART goals, ensuring they remain focused and motivated in their roles. Time management training, right? Providing training on time management strategies, helping employees prioritize tasks and focus on the high impact activities that drive results. I mentioned this before when I looked at workload management systems. Are they doing the things that are actually moving the needle, or are they getting distracted by other things that someone else from another department has put on their lap? Performance reviews with a purpose. I mentioned about my performance review and how that ended up being the gate towards the door, right? And how can you get to a stage where you have performance reviews which have purpose to avoid getting to that stage well beforehand? How can you reframe performance reviews to emphasize actionable steps and focused goals rather than just past performance, and ensuring that continuous improvement and stress reduction continues, right? So those are how I would work with a business using the relief framework. And as you can see, these are not just surface level things. These tackle the root causes, right? In terms of the individual people, the teamwork, how we work as a group, and how we get to a stage where we can build an environment, a culture of things like innovation and care, right? So what can you expect as a result of implementing this relief framework into your company? Is four main things, right? Number one is improved employee well-being. So reduction in stress-related health issues, days off, sick leave, those things like that. Enhanced productivity. Employees perform better when stress is managed. And increased in innovation. Less stress fosters a more creative work environment. And innovation happens when they're okay, or they're not too scared to fail. Innovation stops when they feel like if they make a mistake, they are out of a job. There's a lot to it, but innovation is created when they feel safe to take risks. And so if taking risks means too much stress, they're not even going to suggest something that could revolutionize the way your company is working. Okay, so then you have lower turnover rates, which is as a result of all the further three, the earlier three. A healthier workplace culture that leads to higher retention, which is going to have an effect on your bottom line as well. So my offer to you, like you've sat here and you've watched and you've listened to this workshop, really it feels like, but it's really a webinar which has given you a few thoughts so far. But it's one of the things to note that understanding stress and burnout is only really the first step. The taking action is where change really happens, and you would have seen this before, right? But it's what change are you taking, and is it the right steps that you're taking, right? So I'm offering you a taster workshop where I can do 2-hour session to implement some of these strategies. Excuse me. I'll show them how to, I'll introduce your teams to the key components of the relief framework and equip them with immediate actionable strategies to manage stress. So even in that 2-hour session, you'll be able to see a change. They'll be able to have some of the tools that were going to help them to see different realities. They'll be able to face the same challenges differently as a result of it, right? And the outcomes will be that employees will walk away with clearer understanding of their own stress triggers, practical tools to manage them, and a roadmap of sustainable stress reduction. You can have a look at this in the description, where there's a link to the PDF that you might already have seen, which breaks down the actual session itself and the sections that it has. But I implore you to take note of one of the key elements of that particular workshop, that taster workshop, is the team resilience plan. This is the one where we've gone through the session. Each of the team now know what their stresses and stressors are and how they handle them. I would have brought up to the surface what are the good methods and what the bad methods for the individual, right? And then as a team resilience plan, they get together and say, okay, these are the things that trigger you. These are the things that that fluster you. How can we avoid this as a team? How can I know when you are reaching burnout? How can I know when you are struggling? Do we need a signal? Like all these kind of things. The team create that plan together, which allows them to implement it by themselves. These are the kind of things that we do in that 2-hour workshop. So like I said, the workshop is 2 hours, 1,500 for the single session, or 4-session packages is 5,000 at a discount. And I would encourage you to do at least the single session first. Have a go. Put it in. You'll see the implementation. You'll see the results for yourself, and you'll see how things work. And then I'll be able to come back and do more sessions with you. All right. So what do we do next? What's the next steps? There's basically 3. Number 1 is download your free gift. And so this gift is a document that I created, which is a resource of, I think, 20 strategies. And each one has 2 tactics, two tactics under 20 strategies. And these are things that you can take home, and you can have a look, and you can implement them yourself if you wanted to, right? They are actionable. The way I designed them, I wanted to give you everything. My role is not to necessarily teach you. My role is to help you implement these things. So you can take home the free gift, you can have a look at it, you can implement it, you can give it a go. But then the idea is that at that point when you're like, okay, I actually need more support, and I need someone who knows what they're doing to be able to implement these within my company, that's when you come to me. And that's step number 2, where we book a call. It's 30 minutes. I'm not going to take too much of your time, with a few questions that I'll ask you beforehand. And then we in the session, we go through those questions and say, okay, these are the things you're struggling with. These are the things that I'm going to focus on within the workshop, and I'll adapt the workshop to your situation, especially if you have that one. It's a little bit easier when you have the package, because I can spread it out over time and put them in sequential order. But even in the 2-hour session, we would find a bespoke solution for you as a result of that call. And then number 3 is you book the workshop. So thank you so much for your time. I hope this has been useful for you. Even if I don't work with you, I hope that you've got enough from this to be able to implement something to avoid people like me in situations like I was in, which drove me to burn out, right? The last thing we want is to create a reputation of such a stressful environment that our employees are really losing it, right? And so that's going to have an effect on your bottom line. It's going to affect on retention, and company policy, and company, what's the word I'm looking for? Employee satisfaction as well. So I look forward to working with you in the future. Remember these 3 steps: download your free gift, book a call, and then book the workshop. And I look forward to working with you soon.